Everyone will agree that team meetings can be very costly to an accounting or bookkeeping practice or to any organization for that matter. Have you ever wondered whether or not it's really worth it? So today we're going to discuss whether it's really beneficial to have those team meetings and also some suggestions on how to have a better organized team meeting. So today I want to talk about team meetings for an accounting or bookkeeping practice. And actually what I'm going to talk about today would apply to almost any business out there. One of the benefits of having regular weekly team meetings is it gives everybody a great opportunity to share those great ideas. So in our team, there are three things especially that we would capitalize on and make sure that were kind of brought up at team meetings. And the first one was technical. So we always made a point of having the team meeting, having an opportunity for everybody to share the things that they've learned during the week. So they might have been working on a tax return and discovered that the software does things that they didn't know it could. Or they might have discovered a new tax rule that nobody knew about, or whatever. So I think team meetings is a terrific opportunity to share technical ideas. But also don't be afraid of taking that opportunity to maybe share a video that you might have found really interesting and beneficial. Or bring in a guest that can talk on a subject matter for which the firm is not totally at ease about. So don't be afraid to use those team meetings as an opportunity for the entire team to learn new information and to share these new information. The second thing that you want to do at these team meetings is to have an opportunity for client servicing. So in other words, to share ideas on how you can service your clients better. So we always make a point of talking about the things that we could do that would improve the way we service our clients. And so this is where we will bring up any complaints we may have had, or also even the bouquets that we may have received. So we get a sense of what clients really hate and things that they really appreciate, and to put everybody on the same page as it relates to that. The third thing that we tend to discuss at our team meetings is just the internal processes. So this is where it's an opportunity for everybody to vent about how we do things at this office. So how the file goes from the being picked up, to being done, to being printed, to meeting with the client, and all of those steps. And oftentimes, it's by having those team meetings and every department sharing the frustrations and working with the other departments, so that we can flush out all of those problems and make working here so much better, and usually by doing so also improve the quality of the service that we're providing to our clients. One of the tremendous benefits of having regular team meetings is it allows better buy-in. So if you come up with a great idea and you present it to the team and you're saying, going forward, here's how we're going to deal with this problem. Obviously, that's a way of doing it. But what I found is that I had a lot more success as running this office as a democracy rather than as a dictatorship. So in other words, if I had a problem, even if I knew what the solution was, I was often a little bit reluctant to sharing the solution immediately. And instead, what I would do is I would present the problem to the entire team and ask them to debate possible solutions. And here's a couple of benefits for that. One is they may come up with solutions that you never thought of. That is phenomenal. The second thing is there's pretty good odds that they'll come up with the same solution you came up with. And if they do, the buy-in is usually a lot better if it comes from the team other than yourself. So oftentimes I would bring a problem up, I already had a half-cooked solution, and I would just wait for them to come up with possible solutions. And whenever the solution that I possibly agreed with came up, I would say, great idea, Sam. Let's talk about that. I think this is a great way of proceeding. Anybody have other thoughts on how we can improve on that idea? Now, the beauty is when the time came to implement that idea, it was better received and implemented because the buy-in was 100%. Because the idea didn't come from you as the leader, it came from them. So of course, they're going to be more readily happy in implementing an idea that came from them rather than you. Another obviously clear benefit of having team meeting is just firm culture. Just having an opportunity to discuss and share and all of that is good for team culture. It builds a family, and I'm telling you, it is worth the money that it'll cost you to have those team meetings. The other benefit of team meetings, other than just the improving culture, is increased loyalty. Because let's face it, employees will have a tendency of sticking around and having greater loyalty if they feel they have a say into how the organization is run. So team meetings will more than likely increase loyalty from your team to stick around because of that flexibility to have their say and impact the practice. So I've discussed some of the benefits of having team meetings, but before I get into the how to run a better team meeting, I would really appreciate if you could like the video and subscribe to it. So now that we've discussed some of the many benefits of having team meetings, I want to get into the nuts and bolts of those team meetings. In other words, how, when, what, and of team meetings. The timing of those team meetings can vary from firm to firm, and I've seen everything, and I don't think there's necessarily a much optimum time, but I tend to favor beginning of the week. So I was a big fan of doing it on Mondays or early in the week as much as possible, and if possible, first thing in the morning. So Monday morning was probably my favorite time for team meetings, but it may not always work. So for us, Monday mornings seldom work because we always seem to have someone who was working part-time who came in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So Monday resulted in a few people not being there, and we always found that there was another day of the week where everybody was there. So what you want to do is pick a day and a time where you're going to have maximum people there. And that becomes more and more difficult as the size of your team grows. So if you have a team of only 3 people, well, you could probably pick almost any given time and make sure they're there. But as the team grows and the dynamics change, the time of those meetings may become more difficult to schedule. Something that we've done for the longest time and still do is have our meetings during lunchtime. Because let's face it, lunchtime is a downtime. And especially during tax season where we're already working long hours, have too much work on our plate, and every time we have, say, a 1-hour team meeting, then to pull everybody away from their workload for a whole hour during tax season was quite challenging. So for that reason, especially during tax season, we often held our meetings during lunchtime. Because let's face it, during lunchtime, they've stopped anyways, or they should anyways, and they're no longer producing. And most people won't object to us having some discussions while they're eating. So we would tell everybody, look, it's now 10 to 12, get your lunches, put it in the microwave, and we're gonna start our lunch meeting at 12 o'clock sharp. And then we would have our team meeting start at noon. Next, I want to discuss a few suggestions on how to make those team meetings better for you. And I'm just going to throw a whole bunch of ideas at random in no particular order. One of the first things I would tend to recommend is that you consider having a whiteboard somewhere that everybody has access to. A place where people can write down their topics that they want to discuss at the team meeting. So what we suggest is put down your ideas that you want to discuss and put your initials at the end so that when the team meeting comes up and we get to the topic that you want to discuss, I can just take a look at the initials and know who it was that put that idea down on the whiteboard so that they can initiate the discussions and conversations on that topic. So having a whiteboard will really help not only create your agenda more easily, but the team is really going to appreciate the fact that they have a say in driving those team meetings and driving that agenda by simply adding their things to the agenda at their free will. Another suggestion that I suggest that you do is that you have minutes taken at those team meetings. because you'd be surprised how often things are going to come up and you're going to say, we already discussed that. But for the life of you, you can't remember what was agreed at that team meeting.
Oh, déjà vu.
So now if you don't have team notes or minutes, you're going to have another team meeting to rediscuss the same problem and go over the whole process all over again. So having minutes is a good idea. But the problem that I encountered is sometimes I would have team meetings, we would have the minutes, but then 2 years later, a problem would come up and I would think, we've had that discussion already. We already discussed this at a team meeting. Now, for the life of me, how do I go about finding that team meeting and those notes that were taken at that team meeting? So at that point, rather than storing our minutes in chronological order, we chose to store our minutes in category of subject. So we had about 10 different subjects in our minute book would be categorized by subject. So we had one on team and office policy, we had one on client servicing, we had one on pricing. So you can develop as many categories as you like. So then when a thing comes up again and you want to go back to your old notes regarding something that was discussed, you can say, well, this falls into this topic. You pull out, and rather than having 20 pages of minute notes to go through, you're probably just going to have a page or two. So that is a nice way of retrieving those old minutes. But make sure you date those minutes, because you can say, well, that, or you may find that some of those minutes may seem odd. And then when you see the date of that meeting, you're going to say, well, no wonder it's a bit odd, because this meeting or this decision was taken 4 years ago. So it might be worth revisiting and changing our processes. Something that's really important as a leader of your team, whenever you're having those team meetings, that you make sure that everybody speaks. So make sure that you encourage those who tend to be more quiet around the room to speak up and pull their thoughts. So there's nothing wrong when there's a whole bunch of discussion, but you notice that Mary over there is not saying a whole lot, is to even bring it up. Hey, Mary, I've noticed that you haven't said a whole lot. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on this. And most of the time, if you kind of prompt them, they will give you their thoughts. So make sure that everybody tries to speak up as much as you can, and make sure they feel safe to do so. And by the same token, watch out for hijackers. And what I mean are those people who will just talk, and not allow other people to speak. So that is a bit of a touchy subject, because you don't want people to shut up, but sometimes you need to try to find a way to get them to be quiet for a few minutes to allow other people to talk. And by the same token, those hijackers sometimes can come off as intimidating. So if you feel that the hijacker is intimidating others, you need to work on a process to alleviate that intimidation. And on the subject of hijackers, something that we see quite often is going to be the owner hijacking the meeting. And I've been guilty of that myself, where we have a team meeting and I've got some things that I want to share, and I will hijack the whole meeting. And then at the end, I'm surprised that nobody spoke up. Then I realized, well, I hijacked the whole meeting. No wonder nobody spoke up. So one of the things you want to try and do is try to speak as least as possible and speak last. Something I heard recently is that Mandela, he was, I think, pretty much recognized worldwide as being one of the best leaders. And I've heard said that much of his leadership skills he learned from his father, who was a tribal chief or something to that effect. And one of the things that he apparently learned from his father is that whenever he'd have a meeting with his council, he always made sure he spoke last. And I think that it is a wise way of leading a team and a team meeting, is allowing everybody to speak and then you as a leader speaking last. In those team meetings, as a leader, don't be afraid of sharing a little bit of yourself. and show a little bit of vulnerability. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And I always found that if I was able to show vulnerability, and although I've always found that difficult, and most leaders do, being vulnerable in front of your team is always difficult. But showing vulnerability really helps create a sense of safety. So don't be afraid of doing that, because it'll reap big benefits. Another suggestion that I would have is you try to keep your meetings as short and concise as you can. So it's okay to let your team to go a little bit off on a tangent, but pull them back in. Because the last thing you want is for meetings to drag on and on and on. Because not only does it become extremely costly, but most people don't appreciate those really long meetings. So keep them as short as you possibly can without stifling the creativity and the people feeling at ease and voicing their thoughts. At those team meetings, make sure that there's respect among team members, that nobody feels as if they're shunned by offering their suggestions. So I think you have a role, an obligation in running those team meetings to making sure that everybody at the table feels respected and heard. Another thing that I've learned over time is to try to keep those meetings optimistic. And especially as the team grows, the likelihood that you're going to have a pessimist on your team increases. So those pessimists are going to be the people who are going to keep bringing up the complaints, the problems, so on and so forth. And of course, you want them to do so, and you want them to feel safe doing so. But you want to make sure that meetings are being left on an optimistic note. So whenever people bring up a whole bunch of negative things, make sure that you actually really address those negative things and give it a positive spin, such as saying, I really appreciate, Jack, you bringing this to our attention, and let's discuss ways we can maybe alleviate that problem. Let's make this thing better, and let's find a solution to Jack's problem. And if among the discussion nothing really comes up that satisfies Jack, let Jack know, okay, we didn't come up with anything great yet, but let's all percolate on this and let's bring it back at the next team meeting and let's see if we can't find a solution. So at least Jack leaves the room optimistic that there's hope for finding at least a decent solution. And finally, on the subject of finding solutions, one of the things that we always work our best to do is to have unanimous consent. So we may not have everybody totally on board, 100% behind the given decision, but you want to at least get to a point where everybody's willing to say, okay, I don't agree with the course of action we've decided upon, but I'm at least willing to give it a shot. And so we tended to have those meetings go on until we had everybody at least at that point, where they felt as if they were willing to live with that decision, at least for a while, to try it out. And then if it doesn't work out, that we agreed that we would possibly bring it back to the next team meeting and rehash a new solution. So, like I said, we may not have had always unanimous consent, but we always got to a point where people who were against the solution or the proposed solution were at least willing to give it a shot and live with it for a while until we found a better solution. And finally, make those meetings fun. Don't be afraid of adding humor to it. Allow people to laugh. If you got people who are a little bit jokers, let them make their jokes. What you want is for people to want to come to those team meetings. And so for me, it was important that whenever I announced there was a team meeting, that people wouldn't go, oh no, not another team meeting. And especially if we have it regularly every Monday morning, I don't want people to dread the Monday mornings because of the team meeting. And actually, what we always tried for is that people would look forward to those team meetings. And that's the culture you want to have for team meetings. So make them fun, but more important yet, make them safe. Make it a place where everybody feels totally safe to share whatever's on their mind, whatever's on their heart, and feel safe sharing it with the rest of the team. And that may require you cultivating some of that on each one of your team members. Because like I said a little bit earlier, there may be team members who will be intimidating to others. So you will have to cultivate that skill in that intimidating team member to become more respectful for the people who are easily intimidated. So finally, I would really love to hear your experience with regards to team meetings. So I'm sure a lot of people are listening to this video and are having regular team meetings. And I would really be curious to know how they work out, whether you find they're beneficial, what are the things that what are your challenges related to those team meetings, things that you would wish would improve. And so you can either do so right below as comments to this YouTube video, but if you don't want to make it public, because I can see some of you might not appreciate that, you can also join our private LinkedIn group, and you just go below onto that link, and it is a whole bunch of practitioners sharing their concerns, their problems, and possible solutions. So again, in this chat, we're concentrating on practice management questions. We tend to avoid tax questions, we tend to avoid audit questions, we tend to avoid accounting questions. It's all about running a better practice. So if you're looking for a place where you can chat about practice management, here's the place you can do it.